All right, so 6 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome back, everyone, or if this is your first time here, welcome. Couple of announcements before we get started. Don't forget to sign in. First of all, it's going around. If I already have your email address, don't worry about it. We can give it to me again. I already have it. That way I can just kind of keep you in the loop in the future things. I just want to remind everyone that this presentation, as with all of our presentations going forward, and we have a few from the past, are available on our website. So on the city website under emergency management. So really good resource to go there and watch previous presentations that we've done about emergency preparedness. Mark your calendars for October 17th. That is the Oregon Shakeout Day, and as the city of, I'll let you know right now, the city of Rockaway Beach is going to be doing a very large shakeout drill. So we're gonna, if you're involved in CERT or preparedness or radio, you're all gonna have big jobs that day. So it's gonna be really fun, and we're gonna learn what we're capable of that day. So without further ado, I would like to welcome back Dusti Linnell. Dusti was here about November of last year, presenting us with water sanitation. It is an amazing and very much going to be useful if we cannot get clean water, right? Dusti is a professor at Oregon State University in the College of Health. She serves Tillamook and Lincoln counties through the Extension Service Family and Community Health Program. She provides educational and technical assistance to communities on the Oregon coast to promote health and well-being. Welcome, Dusti.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. How many of you know about the Oregon State University Extension Service? A few. Great. So I'm here in Tillamook County, and I serve both Tillamook and Lincoln counties, so I'm available here to help the communities. So I'm really excited to be here today to talk about water sanitation. And I think what I want to start with is actually a little bit of my background with disaster. Speaking of October 17th is the Great Shakeout Day. That's actually the anniversary of the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake in California. It was a 6-point-something magnitude earthquake, and it destroyed a lot of parts of San Francisco, Oakland, and all around the Bay Area. I grew up there, and where I grew up was about 40 miles from the epicenter, actually between the epicenter and San Francisco. So we felt it pretty good. And one of the things...
I was at Mountain View at that time.
You're kidding?
Yeah, I was in a building that was sliding all over the ground.
Scott, you were too?
Sunnyvale.
Oh, you're kidding? Oh, wow. I was in Redwood City.
Okay, I was figuring that, yeah.
Yeah, so we were really close to the epicenter of that.
That was a shake.
Yeah, it was a big one. So one of the things that I remember about that is how well prepared we were for it. There was, since the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco, there was a lot of efforts done in the Bay Area to make sure that we were prepared. And I was in school at the time, and our school had regular drills. And it was the reason why I think we did so well. So just a plug to why it's so important to do these great shakeout drills, because it really makes a difference. And to have those supplies available. My experience with the earthquake was our house was possibly compromised. We had broken gas lines. We had other things in the neighborhood. And so we had to go to a friend's house. There was about 30 of us that camped in somebody's front yard for a couple days, as there was no water, no electricity. People were camping, like with cook stoves and things like that, as we made our way through the cleanup afterwards. And so this is all very special to me to get to be here today to talk with you about how important it is to think about what happens when we don't have access to the things we usually do, especially water. Throwing back again to the Loma Prieta earthquake, this is a good example of what can happen, what can go wrong when you have a disaster. This, of course, is earthquakes, but we'll talk about lots of different disasters that can affect our water supply. But here, that earthquake broke all the water mains, and so it flooded the city and many places around the Bay Area. And so when this happens, it means a lot of things. That brings a lot of risk for things, and especially not having access to that water. So let's start with what our systems look like, because I think this is important to think about what can go wrong. And we have probably these two main systems here, which are private wells, and then we also have municipal water systems. How many of you have private wells? How many of you have municipal water? Okay, so we'll focus there. But in both of these circumstances, you can imagine in various disasters, there's a lot that can go wrong. So for example, if you do have a private well, if you lose electricity, then you can't pump your water. If there's contaminants in the groundwater, then you don't want to use that water. You'll want to do some sanitation for it. In municipal water systems, there's a lot of different ways things can go wrong that will interrupt water supplies. And so if you can see in that diagram I have up on the screen there, you can think about if there's something that goes wrong with a storage tank. There's a number of different things that could go wrong there, which means that the water isn't getting into the mains and then out distributed, right? There can also be breaks in the mains. There can be breaks in your homes that prevent the water supply from getting in. So in the example of an earthquake, things can become broken. There are other ways that I'll talk about. There can be contaminants that create a water disaster. So if there's something, for example, that goes wrong in the storage tank. I think there was an incident maybe a year or two ago in Oceanside where there was contamination in the storage that meant that all the water had to be shut down to be able to investigate whether there was contamination or not. And then also a treatment plant. So you can think about like electricity is required for a lot of those operations. So if you lose electricity, you can also lose water in systems potentially. So hopefully that gives you an overview of the kinds of things that might affect our systems. So as I started with, I was talking about earthquakes. I know we're all thinking a lot about things like the Cascadia earthquake and tsunami that could affect us here. But there are other things to think about that could reduce our access to water. High winds can be an issue. Think about the electrical lines being affected by high winds, or there could be damage to infrastructure that's above ground in high winds. Ice storms. Y'all remember when we had that awesome ice storm?
Actually, here in Rockaway, we didn't get any ice.
You didn't?
Nope.
Oh my gosh.
Everybody else did, but we didn't.
Wow.
So we couldn't leave because
Yeah, we couldn't leave.
We were stuck.
Oh, right. Okay. But yeah, ice. Ice can do a lot of damage to a lot of things. It can freeze pipes, which means no water. It can also do damage to electrical lines, right, as the icicles form and bring down power lines. It can bring down trees into power lines that might affect, like if you have a private well, you don't have electricity, you can't pump your water. Waterborne diseases. These are things like microbes that can get into systems. So if you ever have gotten an emergency notice that says you have a boil water notice, we worry about contamination of microbes. And I'll talk a little bit more about that and how to deal with that. Then floods, of course, right? We have floods that can happen that can overwhelm our systems and can contaminate our water. Wildfires can be an issue. And then there are other human-caused things, like the example I described about if there's a human contaminant or a person who contaminates things or some other human-caused events. All right. So now I know the causes. We need to think about if we're going to be prepared for a water crisis, what do we actually need water for? So what do you think? Where do you use water every day? Drinking. Flushing. Dishes. Yep. Bathing. Yep. Cooking. Yep. Boiling water for pasta. Making rice.
Oh, and most important, coffee.
Coffee. Yes. Yes. Yeah. What about your pets? Pets need water too. Yep. Laundry is another one. If you look at the recommendations for how much water you want to plan to have on hand if there were a crisis, you need to plan for 2 to 4 gallons per day per person. Welcome. Yeah. There are a few handouts there if you'd like to grab them. So that's a lot of water. So we'll talk through some of the strategies you can use to think about how you are going to acquire and store enough water to get through a day. If we're talking about emergencies like an earthquake, like I described, that I experienced, we know that it could be days or it could be weeks before some of the things are repaired, depending on the level of damage done. And so it's really good to plan ahead to think about where you're going to get things from. So that's why I'm here today. I'm going to give you some ideas that hopefully you can build into your own personal plans, and then also as members of this community thinking about how you might contribute to the greater community. This is a picture that's from the earthquake that happened in 1994 in California in Northridge. So this person was scooping water out of a broken water main. And so as I described, there's a lot of risks involved in this. And so, but this person probably had no other choice. So again, I'm going to give you some strategies for thinking about, when you don't have other sources of water available, are the things that you can do to make it safe for you to use for all the things we just talked about. So I want you to think about your community here in Rockaway Beach. Where would you possibly get water?
We have an ocean right out there.
Lake Lytle,
Yeah, it looks like Spring Lake.
Spring Lake, lots of lakes.
Yeah, lots of lakes. So you do have some sources that are available, right? And fresh water is going to be important. Getting water from the ocean is probably not going to work very well. But there are, fortunately for you, this community has some water available. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is how we reduce our risk for waterborne illness. So there are lots of different things we want to be concerned about. The first is bacteria. There's things like cholera and Campylobacter. Viruses pose a threat in water supplies. Things like hepatitis A and norovirus. Norovirus is really terrible. You really want to make sure that you are not exposed to that. Protozoa like amoeba and giardia are also common in especially freshwater sources, as well as worms. If you've ever noticed after rain and you've got a bucket on the ground that those worms get right in there, things like roundworms, hookworms, and whipworms are things that you definitely don't want to consume. Those infections are pretty awful. So there are some strategies we'll go through to avoid these things. Okay, so I have for you on the second page of one of the handouts I gave you, this same flow chart, which I love because it is from the Sphere Handbook. This is a handbook that's used worldwide in disaster response. If you've never seen it, I really encourage you to go and download a copy for yourself. It's available for free. It's easy to Google and find. And I've got the name of it there at the very top of the page so that you can find it. But this flow chart helps you think about in a crisis where you need to get sources of water to think about what you can do. And so let's start with the question at the very top in orange. It says, is the water source contaminated? Probably in a disaster, if you're getting water from the lakes or from other sources, you're going to assume yes. So then we follow then the chart on the left-hand side there. So if we say, yes, the water source is contaminated, then the next question is, are commercial water treatment products available? And so that's going to be things like personal filtration systems, which I'll give you some examples of. Tablets you can dissolve into your water, or bleach. And so if you have those things, then you go to the left-hand side. So you can use your, the first thing you want us to do is to ask if the water is muddy. And so that's, just taking a look at it. Is it clear or is it not clear? And so the first thing you're going to want to do is go through either a decanting method so that you're clearing off as much of the sediments as you can. And I'll walk you through a couple of those methods. And then you want to do a double dose of chlorine if you can. If you're using simple filters, which I'll walk you through as well. After that you do that, if it's cloudy, then the next step would be using a filter like biosand or colloidal silver ceramic membrane filters, which I'll give you some examples of, and then another dose of chlorine bleach. And that from then you can store in containers. Yes.
What's that, chlorine and bleach?
Chlorine bleach is it's the same thing.
Same thing.
Yep, I mixed those words up. Yep.
Is boiling just as good as bleaching?
We'll go through that.
Okay.
Yep. It's different.
Yeah.
Is the answer. You use one or the other, though. So if you do have bleach available, you can follow that pathway that you see on the right-hand side. You don't need to do the boiling because the bleach acts in that way. But boiling you're going to want to use if we go through the other side, which I'll walk you through in just a minute.
Because of alcohol, it came up at a past meeting. Is there a differentiation with the percentage of alcohol? There are different levels.
With alcohol? What do you mean?
Or, I'm sorry, bleach. There were different percentages.
Yes, there are. Yep, I'll walk you through that too.
So, okay, sir.
Yep, no worries. That's a great question. Yep. Don't drink bleach. And so, okay, so what we just followed through was if you have commercial treatment products available, it's great to store those things. But let's say you're in a situation where you don't have those things available. You're going to want to do a different set of things to make sure that your water is safe to drink. And so if we follow the same, this chart on the left side again, so we're saying, yes, our water source is contaminated. Do we have commercial products? No. And so then we're going to go to the next step, which is pre-treatment. Is it muddy or cloudy? And we're going to use the same method we talked about, where you're going to get rid of the sediments in the water to be prepared for the next step. And that's through filtration methods or decanting. And then the next step is going to be disinfection. So when we don't have bleach available, we can use boiling, or we can use solar to be able to do that. But the most important question in this pathway is, do you have fuel available? So if you have gas cook stove, or you have something available to you, if you have firewood to be able to boil a pot, then you can boil your water. But let's say you don't have fuel. What is the next thing you could do? And one is to expose it to sunlight, and I'll walk you through that too. I know, we're going to talk about pros and cons here. That's, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that first one we talked about, if we determined that our water's muddy. So let's say you were out at the lake and you were able to get some water out of it. Taking a look at it. Is it clear or is it cloudy or muddy? There's a couple of really simple techniques that you can use. The first one is doing some simple cloth filtration. You can do it with a variety of different filters. You can do it with a simple, like a cotton cloth, or you could use coffee filters or something else that you have on hand, right? It could be a range of things. The things that you want to pay attention to is like if you're going to use a cloth, you hold it up to the sunlight. If you can see holes through it, it's not going to be as good as something that you can't see holes through. But this is a great method to be able to get rid of some of those things. Let's say there's a water source that was maybe it was really shallow and you were trying to get water out of it, or maybe it was a stream that you might end up with some rocks and things like that. This is going to help get rid of some of those things. My favorite of these methods, though, is the 3-pot method. This is a method for decanting, where you do this over the course of 3 days. And so on the top line there, you start on day 1, you have your, whatever you're using, your jar, your, whatever you can find, a bucket. And you're going to let it sit for 1 day. And you can see in the diagram on day 2, what happens is the cloudy dirt stuff is going to go to the bottom and it's going to settle out. And so then you can pour it the following day into the 3rd jar. And so by then it will be clear. So it's like two steps in that process. First day you let it sit, then you pour it in the next one, you let it sit for another day, and then you pour it into the 3rd. So by day 3, you're going to have mostly clear water. So in the circumstance where you don't have bleach available, after you've gone through your decanting or your filtering to make sure it's nice and clear, you want to do your disinfection. And so in this circumstance, if we have fuel available, we're able to boil our water. And the rule for this is you want to bring it up to a boil, a nice rolling boil, let it boil for 1 minute, and then let it cool and you can put it in your storage containers. If you don't have fuel available and you need to do a solar disinfection by exposing the water to UV light, this is a really great process you can follow. It starts with clear plastic bottles. You can use clear 2-liter bottles or whatever you've got on hand, but it needs to be clear and plastic. And then, I'm realizing this particular instruction is for plastic bottles, which has been research tested. I'm wondering if there might be one for glass, if you have glass, but I can't give you that recommendation here. So if you were feeling like, I'd really rather not use plastic, this recommendation is for plastic. This has been well tested around crises around the world, and often it's readily available. Anyway, just a note as I was thinking about that.
It definitely has to be clear and not colored.
Right, you don't want it to be colored.
Like those 5-gallon jugs are colored.
Right, those will not work as well. So the UV light, what happens if it hits a colored bottle? It's gonna disperse the UV and it's not gonna be able to do its work. So it has to be clear so that the UV light can make it all the way through. So what you do in this situation is you got your clear, clean bottles. Clean is really important. You're gonna fill them with water, put the cap on, and then you're gonna angle it towards the sun and let it sit. You can see there on the, it depends on how much sunlight is available. So if it's sunny, this can work in 6 hours. If it's cloudy, it takes 2 days. But if it's continuous rainfall, like it is here a lot of the time, this is not a method that's good to use. So that's why for this particular area, it might be really, really good to make sure to have those commercially available products on hand so that you can use those for disinfection, or making sure you have fuel on hand to be able to boil water. So store up that fuel. All right. There are some really amazing products that are available. They're not very, there's a range of expense, I would say. There's simple ones to more complicated ones that you can get, but I highly recommend getting filtration systems like this. These I'm showing here, they have a filter in it. They can be ceramic filters, they can have silver colored filters, you can basically pump it. It's showing it in the picture on the left. Some of them are designed to just like pump it right out of your water source, and it will filter out especially all of those things that we don't want to poison us, like bacteria and protozoa and worms and things. So this is a really great system to have on hand. I actually have both of these.
What's the brand?
Oh gosh. There's several different brands. I want to hesitate to recommend a specific brand. The one that I have is MSR. You can find these really high quality filtration systems at lots of the outdoor stores, like REI and Dick's Sporting Goods and those kinds of places. You can find them on Amazon. But the one that I really love, especially thinking about preparing for needing a lot of water, so think about how many gallons a day you need, 2 to 4 per person per day. In my household, it's me and my husband, and I have 2 dogs. So that's gonna be maybe 10, 12 gallons of water per day. So I really like something like the one that's on the right-hand side, which I think mine at home holds something like 5 or 10 gallons. And it's a gravity feed. And so, so you have some options about how you think you are gonna need to use it. Whether you might need smaller quantities, like you can see on the one on the left there, the smaller one is actually pumping into a water bottle, and can be really easy. Sorry, I'm standing right in front of you. But again, if you're thinking about like what you're going to need every day, one of these bigger ones might work better. And the range on these products are, you can find them, I would say probably right now it's like maybe $75 for the smaller versions, and those bigger versions will tend to be maybe $300 or $400. So it's an investment. But like I said, there's a range of things. There's also things out there like life straws that are great. Those are, I carry one in my truck. Wherever I go, I have it with me just in case I break down somewhere. I don't have water on me, which I always have water on me. But that's available for me personally. That kind of thing is not going to work very well in a situation like we're talking about where you might be without water for days. So think about what kind of products or what kind of use you will have, and these are the kind of products that are available. Any questions?
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the right time to ask it, but say you have one of those 5-gallon jugs lying around, hypothetical, and it's full of water, and it's like 5 years old, just been dragging it around. Bacteria grows, I mean it's sealed, but bacteria grows fairly rapidly in a 24-hour period, so just filter that through one of the methods. Been sitting around a long time.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would treat it like it's contaminated if it's been around that long. So go through the same thing. If it's clear, you can go straight to the disinfection, whether using, chlorine bleach or boiling or something like that. If you can, try to renew your water at, about once a year. There are different storage times depending on where you got your water from. So if you filled, so you're getting your water from the municipal water system that is highly treated, it's got stuff in there that's going to keep it good for a while. You can actually, you don't have to add anything to that. You can keep it for a year. If you're getting it from another source, you want to make sure and add some chlorine bleach to that, and you can keep it for a year.
Bottled water, does it ever expire?
I don't know the answer to that. Like commercially bottled water.
Right.
Yeah, I've never seen an expiration date on that.
Tastes terrible.
I think bacteria would probably be growing in it over time.
I don't know the answer to that.
I'm Googling it.
Okay, good. Oh, good.
Now, it turns to, if you do canning
Yeah.
and your canner's not full, that you should can water.
Oh,
And use that as a storage system.
Yeah, right.
Because it's gone through, especially if you pressure test.
yeah.
According to the FDA,
Okay.
bottled water has indefinite shelf life as long as it's properly stored.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great.
What?
The FDA says that bottled water has an indefinite shelf life as long as it's properly stored.
And what is the proper storage? That's
I don't know.
the rabbit hole, right?
Yeah. I think it's mostly to keep it out of the sunlight. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and not hot. Because you don't want the plastic to get too hot, right? Because that could
Yep.
damage the plastic. Probably are two good reasons. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, out of direct sunlight, and away from toxic substances like gasoline, pesticides, and cleaning supplies.
Okay, great. So let's talk about disinfection. I think this gets to your question that you asked earlier about how much. It depends on the type of chlorine bleach that you have. You will see anytime you buy bleach, it's going to say a % sodium hypochlorite. That's what you're looking for. And you're going to adjust how much you put in depending on which product you have. You can see that there's the recommendations. And this is obviously in your PowerPoint slides. This is why I wanted to make sure that you had these so that you could take these with you as a reference. So you can see the difference there. So for example, 1 gallon of 1% of the sodium hypochlorite needs 40 drops to be able to be disinfected, where 1 gallon of the 7 to 10% is going to only need 4. So as you're making your plans for your preparedness, think about.
What's the shelf life on that?
It's not very long, yes. So bleach in general lasts months, especially if it's open. It's going to actually last a lot less than that. One of the things to think about is anytime you mix bleach and water, it actually will only do disinfection for about 24 hours. So if you have previously mixed bleach in some water that you are trying to use for this purpose, it's not going to do the job, right? So it needs to be straight from the bottle and relatively newly opened. So I like to replace my bleach about every 6 months or so. Yeah.
What is the percentage of household that you use in your laundry? I've never even looked at the label.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know actually.
But I think they have different percentages, just like anything.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, these are all regularly available in grocery stores, so it depends on the product. Yeah.
Yes, we have a question. They make chlorine tablets or
Yes.
powder that you could use instead?
Yes.
And would that last longer than buying liquid bleach?
That also has a shelf life. I don't know the answer to how much different it is. That's a good thing to look at. It should have the information along with the product available, depending on what you're looking at purchasing. Yes, there are things available in liquid and in tabs. Yep. Yeah. And you can see here there from our extension resources, there's a calculation there for teaspoon. So that says to me there's probably some powder available as well.
It's not in the materials, so what, the screen, I didn't find it. It's on bottom of page 8. Oh, see, I need my cheaters on, thank you.
Yep.
So the water purification tablets that you can buy, is that just bleach or do we know? Because they usually come like in a sealed.
There's probably different mixes of things. Usually chlorine bleach, the sodium hypochlorite, there is a main ingredient, but there may be other formulations. So if it's charcoal is usually used for a different purpose. It may help with some of the attracting other substances that are in there, but it depends on the formulation, depends on the company and what they've got in there. There's a range of things that I'm sure they have in there. Yeah. But that's where it's great to have those commercial things available on hand. So if you don't have those things, you've got some bleach, this is what you can use. All right, and you can see the thing that I haven't said at the bottom there, which is you do want to make sure that the bleach stands for 30 minutes. Once you've let it sit for 30 minutes, that's when you can store it in your clean containers. All right, let's talk about containers. There's lots of things available out there. These are ones that are great. They're plastic, they're really easy to use, they're easy to clean. I really like these because there's a spigot. I don't know if you can see it very clearly in the picture there, but on the top right-hand side of that, it's a spigot, so you can actually dump it over and you can set it on a countertop to be able to fill your coffee pot or your dog water bowl or whatever you need it for. But there's a wide range out there. There's metal containers, there's plastic containers. They're great. I have a few different kinds, and I don't think it makes much difference as long as you keep them clean. If you're storing them, you want to make sure and rotate your water out. And then also thinking about cleaning them between uses, soap and water does the job. So if you think about what we just talked about, you do your disinfection, you put it into your clean containers, just a simple soap and water is going to do the job for getting them ready for the next use.
And how long did you say it would last in a storage container? How often should you rotate it?
It depends on what your water source is. I like to just keep a 1-year rotation. Yep, filling it in my house from my municipal water, it's going to be, it's good for about a year. It will last longer than that, based on some of the recommendations I've seen, but I like to put that in my annual preparedness routine. Switch out my stores of food, switch out my stores of water, kind of all at the same time.
I have a question, Dusty.
Yeah.
So when we're using bleach, do we need to keep the container open, or can we seal it up, or
You want to seal it.
you want to seal it right away?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Definitely. Keep those contaminants out.
Right. I didn't know if it needed to breathe or anything. So.
Great question. Yes. Yeah, we have all kinds of things floating in the air that will contaminate our water.
Sure.
Yep.
So you meant after you add it to the water,
Yeah.
put the lid on, wait 30 minutes before you consume it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Is that what you meant?
Yeah.
Like while it's being treated?
Yeah.
Oh, you can leave it open while it's being treated.
Okay.
But once you get in the storage container, so if it's only out for 30 minutes, it's got the bleach in it.
Yeah.
It also has some fumes and stuff. You want to, it'll like let off the fumes.
Yeah.
But once you get into the storage,
Have health implications as well, but I mean, still just not having enough water, so.
it's minimal. I mean, the amount of bleach that you're using in there is really not a big deal. Chlorine is actually something our bodies use, chloride. But depending on some of it's all safe for consumption.
That's a discussion for another day.
Yeah. All right. Okay, let's talk about, we need to talk about our waste. Also, we're thinking about sanitation. We talked about how flushing is one of the important ways that we use our water. When you don't have any access to water, you have to do something different. If you are storing all your water primarily for drinking and cooking and those sorts of things, you're not going to be wanting to use that water to flush your toilets. You probably don't even want to use your toilets at all, like especially in an earthquake or something where you have broken infrastructure. Where's that stuff going, right? So you want to not use the toilets and have a different system. So there's something called the 2-bucket system. You can see here, one is for pee and one is for poop. And there's a handout that I gave you that has very good instructions, better than I could give you here in our short time together, about how you use these systems, the materials that you need to build them. You can actually purchase these things like outright. You can see that those are commercially developed products. Those can be nice if you want to get a seat to go with it, and then they have some of the materials to help with the disinfecting of the feces and things like that. I highly recommend that you have these on hand to be prepared for an emergency, or at least the parts that you could assemble should you need it. One of the things that's also important to think about that I think we forget is we plan for when we need to use it, but we don't necessarily plan on how to deal with the disposal of the waste. And so there's going to be some things in that handout there, but there's also going to be things that if there was a prolonged disaster, if we're talking about weeks of not being able to have access to toilets of some kind, that there's going to need to be some other kind of community organizing around how to dispose of waste. And so I would just encourage you to, as you all are working together, thinking about emergency preparedness, be able to talk with folks about what does that look like? What would that look like here? There are things that people, you'll find in some of the, like the world's, the recommendations for worldwide crises, digging pits, burning the waste, things like that. But there may also be municipal regulations that you don't want to do that, right? Because it would be against the law. So there may need to be some other alternatives, thinking about how to deal with the waste.
Contractor bags? I mean, what type of liner is recommended? I don't see
I would
one, sorry.
recommend a contractor bag.
Okay.
It's nice and thick.
Thanks.
You can buy kits on Amazon also,
Yeah. It has all the parts that you need to build this that are the kits that you.
Oh, yeah, just, if I don't get that, I've got some Rosenberg buckets, maybe.
Yes, right, you've got buckets on hand. Let's say you didn't prepare, right? You weren't able to get those supplies and an emergency happened tomorrow. What could you use, right? This is why I brought this handout here for you. So it'll walk you through the kinds of things that you want to have on hand, or things that you may have available to be able to deal with that. This is a tiny diagram, I apologize, but I'll talk you through it. So when we're thinking about waste, we're thinking about threats from a few different angles. Primarily, it's poop that's the problem. That in our feces, there are organisms that are natural from our body, but that can contaminate things and get us sick. Especially if there's lots of contamination, we could be getting more sick and further spreading disease. And so that can happen in a few ways. So in the column down the middle here, one of the ways is by drinking fluids. So as we talked about before, as you may need to be acquiring water from potentially contaminated sources, that's one way that we can get waterborne illness. It's also transferred by our hands. So having really good hand washing practices so that we don't have fecal oral transfer of illness is really important. So we're going to talk about hand washing in just a minute. It's a really, really important thing to do in disasters. Flies are a big deal. These are one of the major carriers of illness from feces. And so anytime there's waste, that's why it's important to cover it, burn it, so that the flies don't have access to that. If there's contaminated sewage water, things like that, the flies can transfer illness that way. If there's contamination in fields, it can obviously damage, or there's a risk for us consuming food that has foodborne illness, and so that's another way we need to be worried about things. So if there was a situation where there may have been contaminated food, you just want to be aware that there are going to be ways that you need to deal with that. If you can't avoid eating the foods, like cooking them really thoroughly, right? Following like food safety cooking and not eating raw things if there's potential for any type of contamination. And then also floods. So when we have floods, that also means that potentially any kind of water systems could be coming into contact with contaminated water, and so that can become a problem as well. Yeah.
I imagine upland for animals, we've got lots of animals and they go wherever you want in that way.
Yeah.
So is there a recommended area or for looking, for water runs downhill? Is there, no?
That's a good question.
Or to at least go up a certain amount and break stuff down where it might flow into wherever you are.
don't know.
Okay,
Yeah, sorry.
thanks.
They always say drink upstream from the herd.
Yeah. Yeah, drink upstream from the herd. Usually running water sources are better than still stagnant ones. Yeah, but I think for the purpose of my recommendation at this stage is always count on water you get from anywhere being contaminated. And if you follow the processes we talked about, that'll get you some good drinking water. Hand washing. So this is something that's really, really important to think about. In addition to using water for all kinds of other cleaning, being able to have some kind of hand washing station can be really helpful if you can prepare for that. This is a system that comes from Minnesota Extension, which I just love this photo, where it's using one of those containers I showed you before that has a little spigot on it. There's a catch basin right underneath it, and there's a little bucket next to it with trash. And so it makes it really convenient to be able to wash your hands, turn off the spigot, and then be able to dry your hands and throw your paper towels or whatever away. And you can see there's a little soap on that little table. It's very cute. But those are all the things that would be important for hand washing.
So sanitized water or?
Yeah, yes, please, sanitize
We're
water.
using soap, so.
Yeah, yes, it's better to do with sanitized water for sure. Dishes, you said earlier about how this is one of the ways we use water. If you have a situation where you can't use your dishwasher, it's really good at cleaning your dishes well and sanitizing them with nice heat drying. This is the best method to be able to wash your dishes safely, to reduce the risk for foodborne illness, basically, from any of the things in the that might remain on the dishes after you've cleaned them. So this is 5 simple steps. You want to scrape all the stuff out, then you wash it with your hot soapy water, hot if you can, but soapy water, and then rinse it in a second bucket, and then in a third bucket, if you can, sanitize it using some bleach. And then finally air dry it. And it's really good to dry them right away if you can with a dish towel. That'll minimize the amount of water sitting on them. So that's a recommendation for sanitation for cooking. Okay, so what happens if you do get waterborne illness or even foodborne illness? It's also a really good idea to be prepared for when that happens. The likelihood is that most people will get some kind of illness following a disaster if you're having to get water from other sources. So just plan for it. You could be really great and maybe you won't get waterborne illness if you're following all these methods. That's the ideal, but be ready for a what if. Waterborne illness, things from bacteria, viruses, others can cause a lot of vomiting, diarrhea. Those are risks for dehydration. And so that can be a threat to your health in addition to the other things you might be experiencing during a disaster. And so I recommend that you have some things in your emergency preparedness kit like Imodium, kaopectate, and Pepto-Bismol to be able to help with reducing vomiting, diarrhea in case of a waterborne illness, and so that you're not having dehydration on top of the other complications that can further worsen your situation before you can get medical care.
So how can that, if you have high blood pressure, why would that be affected by using these methods? It's the fluid balance.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has to do with fluid balance. Yep. So yeah, it depends on your circumstances how that might affect you, but yeah, checking with your doctor is going to be super important. So if in a situation where you might not have those things on hand, I've also provided you with, in your handout, as well as in these slides, obviously, a recipe for home oral rehydration. And so you can see that the top one there on the chart. If you start with water, if you add a few things like salt, sugar, and you can add some other things that could add flavor, that's going to be a decent solution for you to try to maintain hydration as best you can if you're experiencing waterborne illness, especially with diarrhea. There are other products that are really great that can help here, and so I've provided a few examples. If you have, if you don't have Gatorade on hand, which is an excellent product for rehydration, you can also use chicken broth, and you can add some things to that. You can use tomato juice, you can use cranberry juice, and the idea here is to get not only fluids, but you also need salts, electrolytes, but sodium in particular that we tend to lose when we have a lot of vomiting or diarrhea. Yeah.
Wait, how does Gatorade work?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It stores really beautifully and in very small amounts. Yeah.
To address the question about blood pressure medications, a lot of commonly used or prescribed blood pressure meds have diuretic properties. So if you're taking one, you check with your doctor, or of course we'll always have the internet up while we have a disaster. But you might want to know about that in advance and make sure that you compensate for that with extra fluid, because otherwise it can drain your test.
Thank you. That's the end of my presentation on water. I'll pause here and ask if you have any other questions before I make you a pitch to look at some of our other resources. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on capturing rainwater? They have some systems you can see that can mock gutters and fill. And I think there might be some regulations on how much of that you can take stemming from the groundwater supply.
I can't speak to any regulations, but I can say that rainwater is a great way to get water, and I would treat it the same way I would with any other. It's like you assume it's contaminated, because there could be things on the whatever surface you're collecting from, or there's even things that that are in the air that the rain will actually drop, so just treat it all the same. If it's nice and clear, you want to decontaminate it by either boiling or using commercial products. Yeah. Great. So as I said before, I work with OSU Extension. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I had to look at the page to look at 2 questions. Thank you so much for doing this. When you said don't use laundry, is there anything we ought to do after something? I mean, do you run on the other water and then you assume going into your washer you're good? Is there anything to not compromise your washer, which is certainly a lot of money?
I really can't speak to I don't have the answers for you about what to do about laundry. You're not going to be able to use your washer and dryer, right?
Yeah.
So you want to, that's something that I didn't include here. You want to be able to have some products on hand, some kind of soaps.
Wash dishes first and then do your laundry.
You could. Yeah, I can't speak to the safety of like reusing water from situation to situation, but it's a good thing to look at.
Thank you. And personal way to ascertain a compromise. We might not get an alert. Electricity goes out. Is there any way to ascertain how long we should start to worry about the water as well, or I don't know?
I think that's the question we're...
Aside, Captain.
No, I'm thinking,
Thank you.
so you're asking if the power goes out, how long until we should start worrying about?
The water.
I don't know.
Okay.
How about, how long would it be if, let's say, the water's not moving anymore?
Yeah, there you go.
I don't know. I mean, I think that's a
Super intimate question.
Yeah.
yeah, it's a communications
We
thing.
need Public Works director.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
email Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the thing too to think about is like if there's any range of scenarios. So I think communication from somebody who's knowledgeable getting out to the community so you have some idea is going to be really important.
Thank you.
Public Works here has a lot of generators that are available. It's mostly for sewage, but they also have generators to keep the water plant going. And that'll work until they run out of water. And that's where the pumps up at, let's say, Jetty Creek are not working anymore.
Great points. There's a lot of things that I don't understand about your infrastructure that you all can ask questions of.
I would say if you're ever questioning it at all, boil it or whatever.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I think, that would be my recommendation here. It's just like, you don't have water, just follow these methods. Yeah.
I've been to other talks similar to this, but not out at the coast, and that say, one of the ones I heard was for Lake Oswego many years ago, that they were saying that their assumption was that they would be cut off from any kind of help or anything whatsoever for minimum 30 days, because we're assuming in a big one that the infrastructure will be devastated, so it's a long time.
It is a long time. Yeah. I've heard people talk about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks if there's a Cascadia earthquake. But it also depends on what the response is, right? And how prepared our communities are.
30 days and they're in the Portland area.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so it could be worse.
We've had this conversation and we talk about 3 months, up to 3 months, if not longer.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, more buckets.
Yes. Yeah. So that's where some of that long-term thinking is really important to think about. Okay, when you can survive the first couple of days, what does that then look like as you want to? And because that's what we really want to talk about, survival, right, in a big situation like that. But being able to think long-term about, okay, so what happens in the first week? What happens in the first 2 weeks? That might be a plan to think about.
Still up for you to have shelter, I mean, that's
Right.
something,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
something for you to think about too.
Yes. Yeah.
If there's no water, there shouldn't be any harm in using just getting water out of the lakes to use for your toilet.
I mean,
I wouldn't
that's the
think
place that I would go.
So-
I would also follow your.
Yeah, so it's like she was saying earlier though, if we have an earthquake, that infrastructure might be damaged, and are we sending that waste into the ground by doing that? So that's why we're talking about bagging it all up and keeping it, either burning it, or, I wrote it down, so that's something that we need to talk about, that you're opening up all these new things for me. But how are we gonna handle that, you know? So it's something we're gonna have to have that discussion, how we handle that in the future, because we don't want that to get into our water. So.
Great. Okay. Well, let me make a quick pitch for the other kinds of resources that we provide. If you want to learn more about emergency preparedness, we do offer lots of resources. We have a whole project dedicated to the Cascadia earthquake and some other related tools that relate to, I think, a lot of home preparedness, as well as helping maybe think about community-wide needs in a disaster. So you can go to catalog.extension.oregonstate.edu, and you can find a ton of stuff there. That have just a couple examples there. And included is the one that I gave you today on sanitation for waste. And we're all over Oregon, so if you're not a full-time resident here and you live somewhere else in the state, you also have an extension service office that you can go to and get help for things like this and many others. So I just wanted to make that quick plug that we have people in every single county in Oregon. There's usually like 3 or 5 of us from a variety of different programs. You might have heard of 4-H Youth Development. We're probably most famous for that one. We're also well known for our agriculture services, but then we also have health services like I provide. For example, this seminar today, we do work in forestry and natural resources. We help youth with getting pathways to college. We also support our fisheries. Anyway, if you ever have any needs related to any of those areas, we have people available for you in every county. I have one last ask of you. My bosses like to make sure that I get reviewed for the classes that I teach. Would you please fill out an evaluation form for me today? I'd appreciate that. I'm going to send those around.
Dr. Linnell, you're at Port of Tillamook Bay, that complex, aren't you?
I'm actually at the Partners for Rural Innovation building at the Tillamook Bay Community College.
Okay, but see,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah.
I will say that website is amazing. There's so much information on there. I've used it quite a bit, actually.
Oh, good. Our catalog?
Yeah.
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 I use it too.
Yeah. So thank you, Dusty. Great information.
Yeah.
So I want to give you this. It's a very small token of my appreciation for you coming and doing this, especially on such short notice. I really do appreciate you coming back and doing it again. My wife actually made this.
Oh my gosh.
It's a Rockaway Beach coaster.
Oh,
Rockaway Beach
that's so
coaster.
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm really
Thank
happy
you
to be
for
here.
coming. This is such important information. It's nice to have you here.
So thank you so much. Oh, this is so special.